Hello and welcome to Founders Amplified, where we spotlight underrepresented founders who are driving innovation and impact across various industries and sectors across the globe. I'm your host, Narayan Kulkarni, and I'm excited to be here with you today. Today's bonus episode is a special panel featuring two fantastic women scientists and leaders driving change in femtech and women's health. The first leader who joins us today is Dr. Muskaan Bhan. Dr. Muskaan Bhan is the Chief Clinical Officer at Yoni Health, where she leads clinical strategy, evidence generation, and product development while overseeing safety, risk, and regulatory readiness for global markets. And the second leader who joins us today is Dr. Melissa Mezzari. Dr. Melissa Mezzari is the Director of Microbiome Innovation at Yoni Health, where she applies her expertise in microbiology and biological sciences to advance microbiome-focused solutions for women's reproductive and vaginal health. Both Muskaan and Melissa are integral leaders of Yoni Health. Yoni Health is building the first real-time device designed to monitor vaginal pH and basal body temperature for fertility tracking and early diagnostic insights. Founders Amplified has also featured Yoni Health's founder and CEO, Roswitha Verwer, in our Amplified Weekly series. We've included a link to that feature in the show notes for this bonus episode. I highly recommend that you read Roswitha's Amplified Weekly feature because of how nicely it complements this bonus episode. In this bonus episode, we'll dive deeper into the unique journey that Yoni Health is taking in women's health through the perspectives of Muskaan and Melissa. And by doing so, we're collectively expanding the scope of what it means to amplify underrepresented founders by giving voice to the outstanding leaders on their teams that drive innovation and impact. So, now that you know a little bit more about what to expect in this bonus episode, let's dive in to the conversation. Welcome to Founders Amplified, Melissa and Muskaan. How are both of you today?
Very good, thank you. Hi, Narayan. Thank you for having us.
Doing great, thank you.
You're most welcome, and thank you both for being here once again. So to our audience, this is a very special bonus episode featuring Dr. Muskaan Bhan and Dr. Melissa Mezzari, both of whom are important team members of Yoni Health. And for those who have been part of the Founders Amplified platform, Yoni Health, specifically its founder, Roswitha Verwer, was featured in our Amplified Weekly series. You'll see that information in the show notes. But today's episode functions as a deeper dive into Yoni Health, specifically through the eyes of and ears and perspectives of Melissa and Muskaan. And so I'll be asking them questions on the themes of identity, innovation, impact, lessons learned in kind of a deeper dive episode, and then we'll let the conversation unfold from there. So let's get started with this question. So first of all, I would love to know from each of you more about what your role is at Yoni Health and what led you to be part of Yoni Health in that capacity.
I can start if that's okay. I'm Dr. Muskaan Bhan, and I'm the Chief Clinical Officer at Yoni Health, where I lead the clinical strategy, evidence generation, product development, so like overseeing the safety risk analysis, regulatory readiness, and for basically expanding to global markets. And how I led to be joining Yoni Health basically is through, so I trained as a medical doctor, and a bit about my background, and I moved on to do a master's in global public health and policy, where women's health and women's health across the globe was my niche, even in my dissertation. I then moved on to working with a couple of other startups and other NGOs across women's health, and then that's where I really found my passion, and I realized that that is something that I makes me go on to be happy at work every single day, trying to make the world a bit better for women around the world. And moving fast forward now, I got in touch with Roswitha through LinkedIn, and that's where we had a chat. She introduced me to Yoni and told me about what she was doing. And yeah, I quite resonated with her stories, with the experience she's been through as well, and just found, my creative passion within Yoni, and that's how I joined Yoni.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Well, I'm Melissa, and I'm the Director of Microbiome Innovation at Uni Health. My responsibilities involve on conducting technical review and clarification to ensure scientific accuracy and prototype readiness of our educational material and clinical material. So I provide expert scientific input to support the business, the regulatory roadway, and also the investment decisions. So my journey as a scientist started because I'm very curious, and I'm always out of my comfort zone, and I'm exploring ways to advance and get to know more about the science. So that's why I also, based on what Muskaan mentioned before, we're here for a purpose, and it's a one-way ticket to our life, right? So I want to make sure I have a deep desire to make a difference. So I'm a biologist, and I have master's and PhD on environmental engineering. I have acquired expertise also in biomedical informatics, and I have spent several years pushing the frontiers of science in the laboratory, but I quickly realized that this groundbreaking research often remains trapped within the academic journals, and a lot of potential remain untapped. And a lot of research that you do in the lab, not even 10% of what you do in the lab gets published. So it's all trapped in there, and then this is only a fraction of the publication that gets to be translated and out there for the public to read about that. So this gap in the science that we're doing to the communication or the transformation into cutting edge technologies is really what sparked my purpose in becoming entrepreneur. And regarding Roswitha, how I found her is a connection from a connection. Over here in Houston, I run events, monthly events. It's called Cup of Joey, and then I meet people personally, and they talk about their experiences in life, what matters, their purpose in life. And then one in the conversation of female technology and the passion that I have developed, somebody said, "Oh, you need to meet this person," which will introduce me to Roswitha. So that's how I got in connection with her. And throughout my scientific path, I really developed a passion on human health as well and human microbiome. And at Yoni Health, I'm really privileged to bridge this gap between the cutting edge research into the women's health. And so I'm thrilled to be in this journey and thrilled to be bringing that information to you today.
Amazing. Thank you both for sharing. I want to amplify and highlight a few things which I heard, which I just want to share for our audience. So, as our audience knows, I'm Indian American. I have a mom and a sister, and who are both amazing doctors and researchers. And so it is always music to my ears to hear from amazing women leaders like the two of you, who are in your own way bringing your own expertise and blending that with your passion, creating something that's really actionable for our society. One thing which I also appreciate that both of you have talked about in different ways are bringing your theoretical training in medicine, Muskaan, as you've talked about, environmental engineering, most of you've talked about, but then finding ways to actually translate that into action, which actually helps people in a really important area, which is resonant with your own personal passions, it sounds like, in a very actionable way with other people. So I find that very fantastic that you're doing that, Muskaan, for example, with your work, like public health and as a chief clinical officer. Mostly you're doing that, it sounds like, in your work with scientific readiness, regulatory readiness, and those aspects. And so, again, amazing. Thank you for sharing a little bit about each of you. And that actually is a perfect bridge to my next question, the very first big question I'm curious about when it comes to your work. So, as you both have alluded to, as our audience knows, Yoni Health is a innovative startup in femtech, medtech, and it touches a really important intersection point, and also in vaginal health, more specifically within femtech. But it does a lot of really important, innovative things in those spaces. So, could each of you tell our audience how Yoni Health's medical device and its research are innovative among other femtech and vaginal health startups?
Thank you. That's a great question, actually, Narayan. So we often talk about this even within our team and with investors that we speak to on a daily basis, that we're actually building the first ever in-home real-time medical device that can measure biomarkers like the pH and the vaginal pH and the basal body temperature within just one device. And that is something to Yoni, just building this novel device is something that a path that we're taking throughout the journey of the regulatory, because it's really difficult to go through the entire process of going through clinical trials and going through all of the technological readiness levels, and then eventually getting that submission into the FDA or the CE mark. So those for those audience who don't really know about the process, how it goes is you initially start with step one, let's say, which is just to identify what your technology is. So you go into a lab, do some in vitro testing where you validate the proof of concept, and then you move on to building your first prototype that then goes into clinical trials. And then clinical trials go on for like 9 months, depending on what your device is and how diverse you want it to be. So let's say this entire process is rather long, but we're determined to bring this to market. And yeah, we're really excited. And day in and day out, we're constantly talking about just how innovative our idea is and trying to do more and more research and iterate the process and trying to see how we can add on to more features. And we also got like a huge plan already for the version 2, which Melissa's been working on for the last, like, I don't know how long, but we're really excited and for what's coming up, really.
Yes, so it's going through. I love reading research, science, and going through lots of research publications that are recent on female health and female apps. It's just every time that I read, it brings, oh, that's one idea, and that's another idea. It's just bridging this gap on, what's the research that is in there in the laboratory, and then just bring it to market. So this is this is what I have passion about doing. Just make sure that this is applicable. This is going to be used by women everywhere around the world. So our vaginal pH and temperature in real time, it's going to give women instant insights on their fertility and the cycle health. And it's just it's way beyond what the usual apps, fertility apps that are out there that they can do. So we are doing more. And we are very serious about quality and privacy. That's one major issue that femtech is facing nowadays. This is where we're going to work on more seriously as well. So the idea is just to have a handy Yoni Health device, easy to use, and to give real-time insights on fertility and vaginal health, and combined with the smart technology with top privacy and science-backed care.
Amazing. I heard four things, which I really appreciate that you shared. So first of all, in-home privacy, where privacy has been such an important issue, is so crucial for such an intimate part of one's health. Real time, considering, like, as you've talked about, Melissa, like scientific research comes out regularly, and also it can be very outdated. But also, of course, like health is such a delicate aspect, and the vaginal microbiome is so like delicate dynamic. So having those insights are really important. Fertility, of course, is very much that. Instant, I think, is also very important. Also smart tech. So those four things I just think are so wonderful that you've shared. And I appreciate that you've both talked about. Also appreciate that you've both talked about quality and privacy, knowing, for example, like flow, for example, and flow health, that case has been a big point in the news. But like, yes, there's, of course, the technical aspect, but also in a field where there's such an emphasis on justice and such an emphasis on like human rights. And I think that's really important. I applaud that you all are bringing that perspective into a place in a space where that's so important. But now, to a point that both of you talked about with pH and basal body temperature. So I would love to dive deeper into that. So can you tell our audience more about how important and why is it important to measure vaginal pH and basal body temperature?
Okay, so it's the continuous vaginal pH monitoring offers really an early detection of changes that could signal potential infections like bacterial vaginosis, STIs, and it also supports effective self-management to reduce delays in care. That's very important. Sometimes women don't know what's going on, and it's itching or something is happening. And if we provide the education aspect and plus this device, they are able to actually reduce the delay in care. And this is not sporadic testing. This could be used a real-time pH measurement to capture the dynamic fluctuations. Every day you could do a measurement just to improve the accuracy of what you're getting, what are the results that are showing to you. And basal body temperature is to track to provide fertility and hormonal cycle insights. That's more towards fertility. And these metrics can help women and healthcare providers make informed decisions while enhancing the telehealth diagnostics, the personalized care, address a critical gap in women's intimate health management. This is what really Yoni would like to bring over to the table or to the stores.
That was really good. I think that was a very clear explanation that Melissa said. But what we really are trying to do is to help women understand what it means by the vaginal microbiome. And because all of us have like a certain range of vaginal microbiome, and it also changes depending on our ethnicities, our age. So it's just to give women the right information to understand what they can do with this data and the fluctuations of their basically vaginal pH. And this is our business model works in a way that we also are going to partner with fertility clinics and hospitals, as well as with our consumers directly. So it can also help the doctors and the clinicians in how, identify those markers in-house instantly, rather than having to wait for results to come in. So that's also something that we're actively working on for our device to be accurate, to be more reproducible in terms of the outcomes that we're hoping to get, and to obviously reduce the response time as much as we can. So it's instant and can be used in all places, including the hospitals and fertility clinics, for example. And in terms of the basal body temperature, it's just like a confirmation for women to understand their cycle and to help them understand when they're ovulating and how the entire cycle works. So that's going to all tie into treatments given at fertility clinics as well.
Yeah, and just to add on something in there, more on the personal side, right, Muskaan? So both of us, we are from developing countries. Muskaan is from
India. I was born in India.
And I was born in Brazil, and we are both focusing on the educational aspect of what the app is going to bring to the hands of the consumer. And the goal is really to have these devices available to the consumers everywhere around the world, just to make sure that they will reduce the time or the delays in care, just to make sure that they will be safe they will be healthy, and it will really empower them to have decisions and go for treatments.
Wow, beautifully said. Both of you shared such like important points in your response. I just want to highlight a few things which I love that you mentioned. So first of all, so I heard elements of primary and secondary prevention when it comes to like, of course, understanding education, but then like monitoring one's own like a woman's own vaginal microbiome to prevent downstream infection. That's one thing I appreciated. The other thing which I also appreciated, and again, for those who are not as like acquainted with women's health, femtech and medtech, the femtech industry is largely dominated in US and Europe. And there are a lot of the, unfortunately, and the data sets oftentimes are focused on those countries. So it's really important to have people who are from like other parts of the world who also bring that perspective where there's a lot of taboos, challenges in other parts of the world, which can prevent that dialogue. So it's important to have people who have perspectives, experiences from those parts of the world, which both of you do, and bringing, and women from those countries as well, where unfortunately in femtech, there sadly are not enough startups which have representation of women leaders in all parts of like femtech. I just appreciate that you are bringing your own perspective, your expertise, and bringing that voice into where it's needed. And then something else which I really appreciate that each of you talked about was the importance of education, and just where, as we all know, people who are listening to this in femtech know, there's a dearth of data. There are still significant educational barriers in terms of women health for the population and of even for women themselves. So I think like femtech startups play such an important, health tech startups in general, but femtech startups in particular, play such an important role in providing an educational emphasis onto that. But at the same time, to something that both of you implied, and I want to learn a little bit more about, there are a lot of challenges in tackling that, especially when one thinks about how there's so much diversity in like language, educational systems, cultural norms, like body sizes, skin tones, hygiene practices, product access. There's so much diversity in how women experience the world and how they experience their health in different parts of the world. So I'm curious, what are in your perspectives or your approaches to localizing for all those different ranges of diversity in women's experience and what you do with Yoni, or what you envision with Yoni?
I think you really beautifully put it in when you were iterating what we said around how we represent diversity within our team as well as our product. And that's exactly our vision also for our device while we're building our clinical data sets as well as the clinical study trial plans. Our aim is to be as diverse as possible with the demographic we do our clinical trials in, because often we see in lots of, even in femtech, the most important, the challenge that most femtech startups face is the lack of data. And we're basically just playing catch up, all of us individually within our own, because women's health data has been lacking for there's a huge gap in this data set, and that's why we're trying to get the information from all of the demographic target population as possible. So we plan to do our clinical trials within that, keeping that in mind as well, and strategically placing our trials across the different demographic that we can cover as much as possible. Because it's so, like, we often don't talk about it, but even things like menopause has a huge difference how women experience it and how women from different ethnicities experience it. There's not enough data. Recently, I read an article that said there has been like 70 symptoms added to the list of menopause. And whereas we don't really learn about this in med school, like menopause was like one chapter in my gynecology book, like obs and gynae book. So, and then that's the whole thing, right? Because there's no data and there is no data to inform people out there. So we're trying to do our best to include every single demographic possible within the span and capabilities of our team and expertise to hopefully bring a device that can be equitable for everybody.
Equitable and with their own language on the app, with educational aspects in there for them to understand what's this really about, how can it help me. And regarding the gender health gap, it's huge, it's big. It's only in late 90s that FDA has started making sure that every research out there includes sex in the studies for mental health, for you name it, for every type of research that they're developing out there. So, and this actually creates a hurdle on on the regulatory approval itself. It's a long and challenging road, especially because women have historically been underrepresented in clinical trials. So it's a new approach. Femtech is a new approach going over in this road where the gender gap is still existent, and we're catching up. The research is catching up on bringing more information about women physiology. Actually, there are lots of TED Talks out there. One of them that's marked is really women are not small men. And it really represents of what we are. We are half of the population, and we need to have these complex research done and evolve around these regulatory requirements as well.
Well said. I love that you mentioned the part about the severe lack of women's representation in clinical trials, which I think that is a huge hurdle into developing scientific research at minimum, but then all the applications of that for supporting diverse populations. And then to a point that you mentioned, Muskaan, which I also love that you mentioned, is menopause and the diversity in how that's experienced biologically, but also culturally. We've referenced menopause in other episodes in our podcast, but yes, as you've talked about, menopause is such a crucial part of a woman's life, and that also has significant implications on not just her herself, but also her family and her society, the society as a whole. So I appreciate that both of you are talking about these two crucial but often under discussed topics in the realm of health and research. Now, but to that point, I think, and again, so people in femtech know this, but people who are not as much in femtech or women's health know this, but work that's done in women's health has so many other ripple effects and adjacencies into other sectors. One predominant one is climate. And so one thing that I would love to know from each of you is, how do you in your work with Yoni consider the intersection of female health and climate health in developing your product? And whether that's from considering how environmental changes and climate factors affect reproductive health, and how you're increasing access to your device, or anything else.
It's funny that you talk about that, because I talked to Muskaan this morning. I said, Muskaan, do you believe that there are over 150 publications about women's health and the connection with climate crisis? So and 150 papers just this year. So environmental crisis is a health crisis. It's exposure to chemicals, to pollutants that can cause a lot of transformation in the female health, like earlier menopause, impaired ovarian function. Then addition to that, extreme weather events, food insecurity, it creates maternal stress, which will actually affect the baby, and it will negatively affect neonatal health. So women in disadvantaged communities, like developing countries, like me and Muskaan, we are from developing countries. We saw that every day. Women face heightened risks due to these limited resources and healthcare access, and we need to amplify this information and make sure that everyone knows that environmental crisis is also a health crisis, not only for women, for everyone. But how do we connect with the Yoni device? Yoni device measurement of basal body temperature and vaginal pH, right? And it addresses the intersection of female health and climate health by recognizing how the environmental changes impact women's reproductive well-being. So it's directly related. So the rise of global temperature, the increased pollution, the exposure to pollutants, to chemicals linked to climate change can actually disrupt the hormonal balance, the fertility, menstrual regularity, the vaginal microbiome health. So by continuously monitoring vaginal pH and basal body temperature of our device that our device provides, it's really going to enable early detection of these imbalances that can be exacerbated by the climate-related stressors. So this really empowers women, wherever they are, in whatever country they live, just to make sure that they can actually correlate, some climate crisis or food crisis, anything related can actually affect their health and the health of their children. That's it.
And I think also because I read a study from the United Nations that said that the most vulnerable populations are the ones that are always disproportionately more impacted. So it's like we see that because of all of these factors, and people from underrepresented groups are the ones that suffer the most. So it's not just about the crisis that we see in the modern day world, and we think that's the sort of the end for all, but we fail to understand what the impacts are for people who are underrepresented and don't have the voice to even talk about the problems that they're facing.
Well said. Thanks, both of you, for sharing. I especially appreciate, so to a point that you made, Melissa, I think a lot of people, when they talk about climate, women's health, like oftentimes the conversation comes about, we're going to think about sustainable products that women use for like care. Or in my health administration work, a lot of people, they say, okay, we're going to think about the limited use of like sustainable use of facility like electricity and things like that. There's so much of a discussion of that, but not, as both of you have talked about, attunement to underrepresented individuals, awareness of social determinants of health and how those affect women across the lifespan, and also, yes, like how that is disproportionately affecting people from certain parts of the world, like developing regions. Even in developed regions, like in countries like the US, where I live, there are significant disparities. Like there are people from rural parts of California or Iowa where people have like there are people who have challenging circumstances, as is the case in like less developed countries in other parts of the world, in many other continents. So I just think that I appreciate that both of you are talking about these, giving a more nuanced and bigger picture understanding of why that's important and like what the intersection of climate and health, but also tying that into the metrics you're collecting and also the way in which you are, through this conversation and through your work, being a voice of education, a voice of advocacy in the space. So I applaud both of you for that. So this has been, thank you again. Thanks so much for an amazing discussion on telling us about who you are, telling us a little bit more about the innovative things you're doing with Yoni. So this is kind of the first part of our conversation. And we're going to take a brief intermission. In our second part, we're going to talk a little bit more about the impact and some of the lessons that Melissa and Muskaan have learned. So we will be right back for part two. Okay, so welcome back to our fantastic bonus episode with Melissa and Muskaan. This is part two. Part one, we talked a little bit about Melissa and Muskaan's stories and a little bit about the innovative things they're doing with Yoni. And in this part, we'll be diving deeper into a number of topics, but most obviously impact and lessons learned. And so the first question I have for you in this part is, so obviously, as we talked about, you are taking really an innovative approach in the how behind the technology, but also the who and the why in how that's affecting femtech and vaginal health. But let's fast forward 5 to 10 years from the future. What are you seeing in terms of impacts, both inside and outside of vaginal health, that tells you that the work you are doing now is succeeding?
There is no doubt. There is no doubt that we will be continue revolutionizing women's healthcare with patented data-driven devices that will offer real-time monitoring. So in the future, we would like to continue creating point-of-care opportunities and developing countries in rural areas, like I mentioned before, and developed countries as well, to offer these fast and accessible maybe in the future diagnostics tools too for a wide range of conditions on women's health. And of course, these devices will be clinically validated and designed for daily use in their homes. And it's just think about how fintech industry is really growing fast. In this year, the market's projected to expand really, really fast. It's currently estimated to be about $60 billion. And in the future, I think Yoni will address a high demand segment by empowering women with these personalized medicine or science-backed insights. So, and I'm sure that, like I mentioned before, advances on research and development can be translated into applications, home-based applications for health. And we will probably be entering the precision medicine realm with healthcare models that will consider all aspects of patients and genetic conditions and lifestyle and environment and climate and age and any mental health as well. So I think we are on the right path, and I envision a lot of possibilities.
And I also think, like, broadly, what we really envision to do is just destigmatize vaginal health through our science-backed technology that we're building. And so giving women the access to this device and then having the data, because I always say that data is king. And when we've got the right data and we can see the data improving the health outcomes and obviously getting the ROI on the investment for that data, then I think that's just like a winning horse. Like, we're literally revolutionizing the entire industry by having this science-backed tool and getting the data that we need to that we've been wanting to have for women for centuries now. So this will finally give answers for women that are looking for answers. This will finally give the right words, the right education for women to make those decisions, and also to empower women to be able to make those decisions. Because we've seen, like, even for myself, I've seen, like, when I was growing up, I didn't have the right words to even talk to my mum about when I first got my period. Like, for the first 3 days, I had no idea what was going on because I had nobody taught me about it, and I clearly wasn't taught about it in school as well. So I think that's something that we can give young girls and literally every woman in the world the right words to explain what is happening to her. Even in practice, I've seen lots of, like, older women when they try to explain symptoms for menopause, like, they don't have the right words to explain what's happening because nobody knows what's happening to them. And every single time, there's one thing that they always have, I've found common in every patient, that they've said that something didn't feel right, but they couldn't exactly pinpoint what that was. So I think with data and our device, which comes, we will build a companion app, which will be, which will hopefully include the data across demographics and ethnicities. We can give women this power to explain and to just reach out and just talk about what's happening to them with the right words, with the right communication lines, and we'll connect them to the right people they need to speak to. So I think we've got a broad vision, and, like, we're just constantly working towards it. And we also joke about it, like, Melissa comes with, like, a brand new idea from the recent research she's, you know, read. And then we talk about it, like, we're like, okay, is this even feasible? And then we go to Rosemead, like, this is how much it's going to cost. Can you raise this investment? So it's just like a constant battle between all three of us, just, iterating and bouncing back ideas and brainstorming on how we can make the most of the funds we have, the most of our capabilities and beyond, really. So, yeah.
Yes, the cycle, the innovation, the education, and the funding. That's the one that we need to make sure it's running full throttle. And regarding personal experience too, education is the foundation, is the basis for everything. So you know what's going on with you. And one experience that I had when I had my first child, I read the book What to Expect When You Are Expecting, and it gives me a lot of insights about when I'm ready, when baby's coming. And that actually ended up saving my baby's life because I read in the book about the stress that the baby can go through. And it was taking too long for me to deliver. And once I saw some of the symptoms that the book mentions, I had my baby in a university public hospital in Brazil. It was full of technologies, but the nurses were not very well prepared, and I was prepared. So I told them, listen, it's happening X, Y, and Z. Get me a doctor, see what's going on. And that's when they scheduled the C-section right away so they could save my son. So education is very important, and we hope that Yoni Health will bring that to everyone.
I feel like education will be our clinical intervention as a startup and as a company, and also as women that of science. And we are a creature of evidence, being women of science. So I think education is our clinical intervention and our way to give other women the power to just have easy.
Decide, right? To make decisions and make sure that you're going on the right path. Yes, I agree.
Beautifully said. I love that you've talked about things like destigmatization through research, through science, to a point you made precision medicine, Melissa, and like innovating technologically in the field, clinical validation, to the point that you made, Muskaan, also education and how that like really impacts women as well. I also want to add here, I mean, it also, of course, has ripple effects to others in society too. I've shared the story before, but I also want to bring the story here where the first time I learned about menstruation was when I was, so I'm a practicing Hindu, and like there are certain religious days where I learned that like I was able to participate, but female family members, female friends could not, and I was euphemistically told it's quote lady stuff, and that didn't compute until I later learned scientifically. I learned, I asked my mom, who's an OB-GYN, in a bit more discussion, and I did my own searching, and I realized like I had to go ahead and find those answers to understand that this was the case. This was not like, this was things that like was not clearly talked about. And then I learned later on that like, yes, this is a taboo, challenging topic, which also has challenges in other parts of the world. And unfortunately, it does hold back not just women, but also men, but also like entire industries. So I appreciate that both of you are talking about such an important topic, which is of course most important and immediate for women to be empowered with, but also has societal ripple effects. But also I love that we have two incredible women leaders in science who are using their scientific knowledge and their pragmatic lens and their educational drive to create a change. So I thank you, Roth, for articulating that vision and working towards that in your own ways.
Thank you for sharing that now. And this reminds me of like a
yeah.
funny story that I could share of when you said like you growing up in a Hindu household and not having your like this reminds me of when I was growing up with my brother in my family home. And so one evening I came back from one of my classes and I found him just like having the sanitary pad on his elbow, sat in the living room and just like sat there. And I was like, what are you even doing? And I obviously laughed at him, like, what is he even trying to do? But now I laugh at it. But then he was a 12-year-old boy, has only ever known about sanitary pads from TV advertisements and what he could imagine. I mean, I applaud his creativity. Obviously, he imagined this to be just like a big band-aid that he could use when he got hurt. So, I mean, but thank you for sharing that. And I think that's also one of our main goals is it's not just for women, it's also for families, for men, for everybody out there who needs it, and it will empower.
But it must start with and be led by women.
I think we're on the right track for that.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that because, like, I think, unfortunately, like, and you both know this, of course. And again, I've spoken about this in other episodes where, like, unfortunately, the investment landscape in health tech more broadly, femtech more specifically, unfortunately tends to be dominated by men who sadly lack the knowledge, or they're brought up in such cultures where, due to the cultural context, were not like fully educated about that, and there are certain biases or perspectives that they had, and sadly, women's health does not get the investment or the attention that it deserves, and there is a lack of understanding of why it is important, unfortunately, among investors. There still exist investors, sadly, who do not appreciate the importance of why you need women leaders who are like leading the charge in every aspect of women's health. So I just want to emphasize that point. I want to applaud both of you for, in your own ways, doing that in the science, the pragmatism, the planning, and also the articulation of vision. So I wanted to emphasize that. But I have another question related to this. So of course, to execute such a broad vision, there has to be implementation of milestones to get there. So in part one, thank you, Muskaan, for giving us a very brief overview into TRLs, technological readiness levels, but would love to, and also Melissa as well, thank you so much for addressing multiple times a crucial part which is not as discussed enough, which is clinical validation, regulatory readiness. I'm curious in both of your perspectives, what are some of the clinical validation milestones, regulatory readiness milestones that you envision occurring that would lead you to reach that vision? I know there are many, but maybe one or two that you could share with our audience.
I mean, it's a long path. It starts off with the state-of-the-art review that we're currently going through. And then once we do our biocompatibility testing, we build our clinical evaluation report, and then we move on to building our risk analysis files. So it's all like all of these SOPs are a part of the final submission that go into what we're trying to achieve is a Class 2A medical device certification. So once we're in the clinical trial phase and getting all the preclinical and the clinical data, then we build our clinical evaluation report that will feed into things like endotoxicity from materials that we're using, all of the testing that we go through during the outer shells that will be in contact with the mucosal environment of the vagina, and then we work with regulatory agencies and regulatory consultants to support us to build all of these SOPs, and then finally we can go into submission for the FDA and the CE mark.
Yes, it's a long process, and it's a process that all the team is working and learning at the same time. And I would also say that this is something that I should have known before. Is just to get ready for the long path that we're gonna have with the regulatory approval. It's long and challenging, and I hope that we will get there and we move forward towards to meet the compliances that are needed and data security, everything in place, and hopefully get it out there as soon as possible.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. I love that you've talked about the aspect of to rephrase, building the ship while one is flying or while sailing it. And also I appreciate that you've talked about again what is underappreciated, the length and the complexity of even what are quote unquote simple medical devices, because they of course have real consequences. They need to be validated, and they need to really serve the people who are their intended. And of course that is of increasing urgency and importance in a space like women's health, where that, like, again, there are considerations of justice and emotion and things like that, which for which that needs to be done right. And again, I applaud both of you for laying out and giving our audience a flavor for the complexity of that. But that leads me to my next question. So you all have, both of you, I'm sure have, I know for sure you have, look at in our conversations, but and you've also given us a flavor for the challenges that you've had to go through and work through in the work that's you've done so far with Yoni. So I'm curious, in both of your perspectives, what are some things you know now about the challenges of building in femtech and vaginal health that you wish you had known prior to starting your work with Yoni?
So yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges we faced in investor conversations, especially, is when you talk about vaginal health and you just see their eyes growing bigger, and it's mostly men we're speaking to, right? And they get a bit uncomfortable around just talking about the intricacies of vaginal health and explaining to them how important this is and how what we're trying to change here. So I think that's been one of the biggest challenge, along with the lack of data, because we're researching around um, our goal is to be for our device to be as equitable as possible. So include all of the demographics as much as we can within our data sets. But then that data does not exist currently, and so we're facing a bit of a challenge to identify the right kind of data sets to include that within our research and our clinical trial protocols. I think that's been one of the biggest two challenges, because obviously vaginal health generally is also understudied. So there's not just like a playbook to read and then
No,
innovate. We're like creating our own playbook, basically. So
exactly.
yeah, and
Um,
yeah.
well, just getting the hook from there, Muskaan, is really when I started doing, translating the science towards to what we want to build, is really finding out that the amount of publication of female technology has just started to grow very fast, exponentially. Back in 2003, we're just about 50 publications, and 2023 is just, oh, no, 2013 was just about 20 publications, and 2023 is more than 500. So it's just going. It's overflowing with publications now. It's a new information. But I would like to go more deep into the solutions of these femtech devices. They must be, in my mindset as a scientist, and my role is really to make sure that these information is grounded in really robust clinical validation and regulatory compliance, and to ensure the safety, reliability, and efficacy of the product. But to get there, I needed to get some results from some experiences or some case studies in the online, and that's limited. So for that reason, Narayan, I'm an editor of a scientific magazine. It's called Frontiers. I worked in the climate side, and now I'm developing the female technology side. I'm developing a special issue on Frontiers in Global Women's Health. And this will focus on female technology. And the goal really is to establish this high quality research coming towards us to validate the femtech validations that are out there, that are going to happen in the near future, to address these data gaps, to address ethics, to address technology effectiveness. So this is something that I want to build, just to build a strong foundation for female technology, to make sure that I reached out to academic professionals as well as the public to go through the papers that are published in the special issue and see, oh, this is new. This is something that medtech can actually apply, that can actually use, that can actually empower women's health. So this is just fostering the diverse and innovative studies in this special issue to enhance this transparency, credibility, and trust in female technology solutions. So because of these flow health out there and other problems that we are seeing, I want to reestablish femtech as a real deal, as a real solution with addressing these data ethics and technology gaps.
Well
I think that's
said.
quite
Thanks
interesting. And
for
also,
sharing. Yeah.
we're also creating our own publication within that Frontiers
In
section of
women's health, yeah.
in women's health. That's also something really exciting for the audience to look forward to from our end. But we often also hear things like, women's health is too niche, or like the market isn't big enough in most of these investor conversations, or like why would anybody pay for that? And like you name it, and we've literally heard it all. But that's also I feel like if anyone's ever built in women's health, they must have heard these remarks from investors as well. And I feel like we're often only we're using their skepticism as our own validation to sort of see that this is the right thing we're doing, because how can you not understand the needs and the concerns of like the 51% of the population, and how is 51% of the population niche, and why would they not pay for something that can actually make their lives easier and make diagnosing in hospitals much quicker? So I think that's something that people need to understand and just bring those conversations to the table and create, as I said before, we are really creating our own playbook for us and for future female health innovators that are yet to come.
Well said. Again, thanks so much for sharing those wonderful lessons. And also, I mean, this is one reason why I love this conversation, but it's also sad that we're at this time because thank you both for having for sharing such your amazing insights. But sadly, 1 hour of fantastic episode just flew by, and so we're at the end of our episode. And I want to again thank you both for sharing your fantastic insights into women's health, what you're doing with Yoni Health, but more broadly, being leaders in your own ways. And one thing which I especially appreciate about both of you in your own way, talking about bringing scientific rigor, clinical validation, bringing an educational lens as scientists who are bringing this in an accessible way through technology, education, and all those things. So I just applaud both of you in your own way as being leaders through your work at Yoni, and of course, making such an impact in the innovative way in what you're doing. Thank you again for sharing your amazing lessons. And I've greatly appreciate your insights, and I wish you both all the best in what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Brian. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for the opportunity to bring our word out there, and hopefully we will succeed as well and bring these healthcare tailored specialty for us out there.
You're most welcome. I look forward to staying in touch and following you all in what you're doing. And to our audience, if you want to follow Melissa and Muskaan and Yoni's journey, you can look at the show notes for more information. But bye for now. Bye, Melissa. Bye, Muskaan.
Thank you. Bye.
To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Founders Amplified. I hope you're feeling as inspired as I am. If you'd like to learn more about our guest and support them, check out the show notes for their details. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating, share it with someone you know, and follow us for more inspiring episodes like this one. If you're a founder who is driving innovation and impact in any industry or sector anywhere in the world and would like to be a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Check out the show notes for more information. And finally, remember that you, yes, you, have the power to amplify the voices around you. Whether you're a colleague, family member, friend, funder, mentor, or just another fellow human, your support matters. So I invite you to celebrate and uplift the underrepresented innovators in your life who are driving innovation and impact. Let's create a better future for everyone, together. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and keep amplifying.